This is a story about a sleuth. That's the name for a group of bears, a sleuth of bears. In my early 20s, I somehow got the nickname Bear. It stuck for a few years, and some friends still call me that. A few years later, we built our house in the middle of the woods and named our home Bear Oaks. Fast forward to the YouTube days, and I find myself in a relationship with Grizzly, another bear. I think bear is my spirit animal. So, Grizzly had an idea to send me and the other Grizzly guys, Chris Salamone of Foureyes Furniture and Toth, a mystery shipment of wood. And we each had to make something cool and make a video about it. They gave us 2 weeks. To be honest, I wasn't totally sure what all of the wood was, but after opening the crate, we got a cheat sheet. Spalted curly western maple, Indian rosewood, which is actually a stair tread from the founder of Grizzly's old home, some curly maple, curly koa, and beeswing babinga. While all special in their own right, figuring out how to put it all together was a head scratcher. The babinga and rosewood were similar but different enough that I couldn't put them right next to each other. The babinga was really pretty, but the rosewood came out of Papa Grizzly's house, so that made me feel like a part of the Grizzly family, so I knew I had to use that. Family. I should make something for the family. I'm just about to start finishing our basement so we have more room for family to come visit. Why not make matching bedside tables for the new room? So I started with the legs. I cut 2-inch square leg blanks out of that crazy western maple. After cutting some blanks, I moved them to the bench, gracefully, like a swan. I examined all the faces and marked out which grain I liked the best. Then I laid out some tapers. Coming down 4 inches from the top and 1 inch from the side, I drew out the taper on 2 faces. I headed to the bandsaw to cut them out. I would cut one of the tapers, trying to keep to my line, then I would take the offcut and tape it back on and cut the other taper. And once back at the bench, I needed to clean up the bandsaw marks, so I grabbed my number 4 smoothing plane. You really can't beat the finish off of a sharp plane iron, and it's way more enjoyable than sanding. For the table aprons, I was going to use mortise and tenon joinery, so I laid out some lines with my marking gauges, and look at the curl and spalting together. I find you can never have too many marking gauges. I needed 3 separate layout measurements for the legs, and with 8 legs it goes way faster with multiple gauges instead of resetting one and doing everything 3 times. I like to rough out my mortises at the drill press. I set a fence and hog out most of the waste with a Forstner bit. After all the legs were done, I started milling the apron stock, and I used the curly maple for this. I started at the jointer to get one side flat, then took it to the planer for thickness, and this piece was pretty twisted, so it started as a 5/4 board, ended up at only 3/4 of an inch thick. I got the edges square at the jointer, then table saw, then I broke down the board into my apron side lengths. I ripped them to their final width of 3.5 inches, and after that, I swapped out my regular blade for a dado stack and cut the tenons on the end. Once I had all of the tenons cut and uniform, I went back to the mortises to refine the fit. I like to do it this way, and I know some people like to fit the tenon to the mortise, but I find it easier for me to remove a little at a time with a chisel in the mortise, but that's just my cup of tea. After a little touch-up work with the hand plane, I dry fit all of the pieces together. I got ready for some internal components. And when we talked about this project, we agreed that we could use some secondary woods for anything that wouldn't really be seen so as not to waste the good stuff. So I milled down some scrap poplar I had to make a sort of internal framework to support a special drawer. I wanted a drawer front that spanned the full width of the apron, and traditionally there would be rails that support a drawer, but I wanted the continuous grain pattern of the apron to run the full width. So I started making a sliding dovetail frame that would support the frame, hold the top to the base, connect 2 small front aprons while letting the middle of the apron float connected to a drawer box. Oh, and this piece would also support the drawer slides. Then I made a simple jig to cut the tails for any sort of dovetail I wanted to make at the bandsaw. The first cut I decided didn't leave much of a shoulder, so I readjusted the fence, made a second cut, flipped it over, made a third, rinse and repeat. I needed to separate the drawer fronts from the apron, and I also cut these at the bandsaw because I was worried about how wide a kerf the table saw would leave. Next, I glued the short front apron pieces to the support frame and glued the side leg assemblies together. Quick tip, a bag of dollar store straws makes squeeze-out cleanup super simple. Time to start putting it all together. I glued the back apron to the side assemblies as well as the front assembly contraptions I had made. I also glued the back of the internal frame to the side of the back apron. And while those dried, I turned my attention to the drawer. I broke down the rosewood into 3" by 8" strips for the sides, and these were going to be tiny drawers, so I then resawed the pieces in half and cleaned up the teeth marks with a hand plane. Then I sandwiched the pieces together using some tape and laid out some tails using the divider method. Still sandwiched together, I cut the tails 2 pieces at once using my new jig. I cleared out the waste between the tails freehand. Over at the table saw, I cut some grooves in the outside of the piece to fit over the drawer slides, and some grooves on the inside of the piece to support the drawer bottom. Back at the bench, I got set up for lots of hand chiseling, which due to my hand not making a very good window, you'll just have to trust me. I transferred the tails to the pin board, which in this case is the drawer front, so I would be making my dovetails half blind. My first half blind dovetails, in fact. After sawing to just to the waist side of my marked lines, I started getting the waist out. Chop down into the knife line and pop out the waist with the chisel. I did this until I got just above my line, then I would pare out the rest. I made some simple L-shaped slides out of the rosewood and glued them to the internal frame and got the fit just right and then let it dry for a while. Meanwhile, I got ready for finishing and realized I had 0 cotton rags in my shop. I'm using shellac, and this is a disclaimer: do not use a foam brush. I only did it because I was desperate. The alcohol in the cut shellac will break down the foam. You can see here how flimsy the brush is, and it isn't retaining the shellac, leaving a really heavy, sloppy coat. Luckily, shellac is an easy finish to fix. Some gratuitous grain popping shots. And once the shellac was dry, after only a few minutes, I knocked down the sheen with 4/0 steel wool and paste wax, one of my new favorite finishes. While all that was setting up, I turned my attention to the tops. This beeswing babinga is one of the hardest species to work with. Coming in at 2400 on the Janka scale, harder than persimmon to my regular viewers, and crazy direction-changing grain, I couldn't plane it without any tear out, even with the sharpest iron. My card scraper was all I could use to get a decent surface finish on it. I finally sacrificed a t-shirt just for a rag. I let the paste wax dry for a little while, then came back and buffed it with the rag. Ooh, baby. All right, guys, that's it for this time. I really want to say thank you so much to Grizzly Industrial for sponsoring this challenge, this build-off, if you will. I've known Chris and Kyle for a good little bit of time, and I consider them both friends. I've been in both of their shops. They're really inspirational guys. I will put a link to the Grizzly Facebook page in the description with a link to where you can vote on your favorite video and also get a chance to win a $150 gift certificate to Grizzly Industrial. I think the tables turned out really cool. It's hard to envision them in the space as I haven't built the space yet, but I really got to try out some new techniques for me, cutting dovetails on the bandsaw, half blind dovetails, just period. I've never done those. I really like the shellac with the paste wax finish to bring down the sheen and really make that figure just pop. This wood was crazy. I don't know what else to... This was a challenge to wrap my head around putting all those different types of wood together and not make it too crazy. If this is your first time on this channel, I highly recommend you check out some of my other videos, and maybe subscribe if you feel so inclined. I will put links to both Kyle and Chris's videos probably in this end card that's right now. Until next time, guys, I'm Will Walker. This is the William Walker Company Project channel. I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching.